3. Plants that grow wild across the world once sat in every grandmother's medicine kit. Then government stepped in. One won a Nobel Prize and became a frontline pharmaceutical. Another got banned outright. The third was reclassified from folk remedy to approved medicine in the European Union. These are not obscure jungle herbs. They are plants that literally changed the course of pharmaceutical history, and understanding why they were reclassified reveals something uncomfortable about how the line between medicine and weed is thinner than most people realize. This is the story of 3 wild plants, 3 completely different regulatory fates, and the forces that decided which ones you are allowed to use. The first plant looks like nothing. Artemisia annua, commonly called sweet wormwood, is a weedy annual herb that grows wild across temperate Asia and has naturalized in scattered parts of North America, Europe, and Africa. It is aromatic, stands about 1 to 2 meters tall, and looks completely unremarkable. You would walk past it without a second glance. In Chinese, it is called qinghao, meaning green-blue wormwood, and it has been used in traditional Chinese medicine for over 2,000 years. The 4th century physician Ge Hong wrote in his Handbook of Prescriptions for Emergency Treatments in 340 CE that the herb should be soaked in cold water, wrung out, and the juice drunk to treat fevers. More than 1,000 years later, Li Shizhen specifically recommended tea made from qinghao for malaria symptoms in his Compendium of Materia Medica, published in 1596. For centuries, this was folk knowledge passed down through herbal traditions, dismissed by Western science as superstition. Then came a war. In 1967, during the Vietnam conflict, Mao Zedong authorized a secret military program called Project 523. North Vietnamese soldiers were dying of malaria faster than they were dying in combat, and existing treatments were failing against drug-resistant strains. The Chinese government needed a solution, and they turned to their own medical history to find one. A young pharmaceutical chemist named Tu Youyou was assigned to the project. She screened nearly 2,000 traditional Chinese remedies, combing through ancient texts and interviewing practitioners. In 1972, she isolated the active compound artemisinin from Artemisia annua, the same unremarkable weed that Ge Hong had written about 16 centuries earlier. But here is the critical detail that connects ancient wisdom to modern science. Traditional hot water preparations, the standard way of making herbal tea, destroyed the active ingredient entirely. Tu realized from Ge Hong's ancient text that cold extraction was the key. Ge Hong had specifically written to soak the herb in cold water, not boil it. She developed a low-temperature ether-based extraction method that preserved the compound's endoperoxide bridge, an unusual chemical structure that makes artemisinin lethal to malaria parasites. That single insight bridged 2,000 years of medical knowledge. Artemisinin was placed on the World Health Organization's list of essential medicines. Artemisinin-based combination therapies became the global standard treatment for Plasmodium falciparum malaria, saving an estimated 600,000 lives every single year. In 2015, Tu Youyou received the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine, becoming the first Chinese woman to win a Nobel in science. A dismissed folk remedy had become the frontline drug saving hundreds of millions of lives. Sanofi built a factory in Italy to produce semi-synthetic versions of artemisinin using genetically engineered yeast, scaling production to meet global demand. But here is the twist that reveals how reclassification actually works. The World Health Organization explicitly discourages using the plant as tea or whole herb preparations. The artemisinin concentration in the raw plant is too low and too inconsistent, and widespread use of subtherapeutic doses could accelerate drug resistance, potentially rendering the compound useless against malaria. So the folk remedy form is actively discouraged, while the isolated compound is championed as essential medicine. The plant was reclassified because modern science validated what traditional medicine already knew but could not explain mechanistically. The knowledge was right. The delivery method needed refining. The second plant tells the opposite story. Ephedra sinica, known as mahuang in Chinese medicine, is a scrubby evergreen gymnosperm related to conifers, not a flowering plant. It grows wild on arid highland slopes, dry riverbeds, and mountain steppes across Mongolia, northern China, and Russia. Its small, scale-like leaves sit on green jointed stems that look almost like a miniature pine stripped of its needles. It is one of the oldest continuously used medicinal plants in human history, employed in traditional Chinese medicine for over 2,000 years and possibly more than 5,000, predating written Chinese records. Healers prescribed it for colds, respiratory ailments, fever, headaches, congestion, and asthma. Independently, Native Americans used related Ephedra species they called Mormon tea or Indian tea as both a beverage and a medicine. Some researchers have even connected the plant to the mysterious soma or haoma of ancient Vedic and Zoroastrian rituals, a sacred drink associated with strength, immortality, and communion with the divine. In 1885, Japanese chemist Nagai Nagayoshi isolated the alkaloid ephedrine from the plant. Ephedrine has sympathomimetic properties, meaning it stimulates the nervous system, increases heart rate, constricts blood vessels, and opens airways. For decades, ephedrine was a legitimate pharmaceutical ingredient in asthma medications, decongestants, and bronchodilators. It was real medicine, prescribed by real doctors, saving real lives. Then came the 1990s. Ephedra exploded as a dietary supplement marketed for weight loss and athletic performance enhancement. Products like Metabolife sold billions of dollars worth of ephedra-based supplements to consumers who had no idea what they were putting into their bodies at doses traditional herbalists would never have recognized. Then, the deaths started. Ephedra supplements were linked to heart attacks, strokes, seizures, and sudden cardiac death, even in young, otherwise healthy adults taking the labeled dose. Baltimore Orioles pitcher Steve Beckler collapsed and died during spring training in 2003 with ephedra in his system. Minnesota Vikings lineman Corey Stringer died of heat stroke in 2001 under circumstances where ephedra may have been a contributing factor. Behind the scenes, Metabolife had received over 14,000 adverse event reports and hidden them from the FDA. The company's co-founder was eventually sentenced to federal prison. A Rand Corporation meta-analysis found that ephedra-based supplements were 100 to 700 times more likely to cause serious adverse reactions than other common supplements. On April 12, 2004, the FDA issued a final rule banning all dietary supplements containing ephedrine alkaloids based on a 133,000-page administrative record. The ban was challenged in court, went all the way to the United States Court of Appeals, and was upheld in 2006. The Supreme Court declined to hear further appeals. Ephedrine is also banned by the International Olympic Committee, the World Anti-Doping Agency, the NFL, the NBA, and MLB. This is the reverse reclassification story. A wild plant used safely in traditional medicine for millennia became dangerous when it was industrialized, concentrated, and sold without regulation to maximize profit. The plant did not change. The dosage, the context, and the profit motive did. And here is what makes it even more complicated. Ephedrine itself, the isolated compound, is still used in regulated pharmaceuticals under strict medical supervision. The plant extract sold as an unregulated supplement was what got banned. Additionally, ephedrine became a key precursor chemical in the illegal manufacture of methamphetamine, adding yet another layer of regulatory pressure that had nothing to do with the plant's traditional medicinal use. The third plant has the most surprising arc of all. Salix alba, the white willow, is a common deciduous tree found along rivers, wetlands, and moist soils across Europe, Central Asia, and Northern Africa. There are roughly 350 species of willow worldwide, and the bark of these trees is rich in a compound called salicin. Willow bark appears in ancient medical texts from Sumer, Assyria, and Egypt. The Ebers Papyrus, dating to around 1550 BCE, mentions willow in remedies for pain and inflammation. Hippocrates wrote about willow bark's medicinal properties in the 5th century BCE. Native Americans across the Americas used willow bark extensively for sore throat, tuberculosis, inflammation, and pain relief. This was not one culture's folk medicine. This was a convergent discovery made independently by civilizations on nearly every continent. In 1763, Reverend Edward Stone conducted what may be the first modern clinical trial, testing powdered white willow bark on about 50 patients with fevers and reporting it highly effective. In 1828, German pharmacologist Johann Buchner isolated salicine from the bark. In 1853, Charles Frederick Gerhardt first synthesized acetyl salicylic acid from sodium salicylate, a derivative of salicin. In 1897, Felix Hoffmann at Bayer resynthesized acetyl salicylic acid derived from the related spirea plant. By 1899, Bayer was selling it as aspirin, and it became the most widely used drug in human history. But here's the twist that most people miss entirely. Once aspirin was available as a pure, standardized pill, nobody needed to chew bark anymore. Willow fell back into folk remedy status for most of the 20th century, dismissed as the crude precursor to a real drug. But then something remarkable happened. In the early 2000s, clinical studies demonstrated that willow bark extract has genuine anti-inflammatory and analgesic effects, though it works through a different mechanism than aspirin. Willow bark contains relatively low levels of salicin and produces broader, milder anti-inflammatory effects without the gastric damage that aspirin causes. The European Medicines Agency Committee on Herbal Medicinal Products officially approved dry extracts of willow bark as a recognized herbal medicine for the short-term treatment of lower back pain, based on clinical evidence. This was a formal reclassification from traditional use to well-established medicinal use, a higher regulatory category that acknowledges scientific evidence, not just historical tradition. It is the only plant of the three that was reclassified upward by a regulatory body, specifically because new clinical evidence supported what folk medicine had always claimed, and it corrects a common myth. Willow bark does not actually contain aspirin. Salicin is metabolized differently in the body. Willow bark is gentler on the stomach, but less potent. They are related but distinct medicines. This plant has been used medicinally for at least 3,500 years, making its journey a full circle from ancient remedy to folk medicine, to the source of the world's most popular drug, to being dismissed, to being scientifically revalidated and given a new regulatory classification. 3 wild plants. 3 completely different regulatory fates. 1 elevated to Nobel Prize-level pharmaceutical status. 1 banned as a dangerous supplement. 1 reclassified as an approved herbal medicine. The common thread running through all 3 stories is what Paracelsus taught us centuries ago. The dose makes the poison. Artemisinin works at precise pharmaceutical concentrations, but not as tea. Ephedra was safe in traditional doses, but deadly when industrialized and concentrated for profit. Willow bark was dismissed when aspirin replaced it, then vindicated when science showed it has its own distinct therapeutic profile. But regulatory reclassification is never just about science. It is about money, politics, and timing. Ephedra's ban was delayed for years by supplement industry lobbying worth billions. Artemisinin's discovery was kept secret under a military project for decades before the world learned of it. Willow bark was dismissed not because it stopped working, but because a more profitable synthetic product replaced it. The deeper question remains. It is one that regulators, pharmaceutical companies, and traditional healers are all asking in different ways. How many other wild plants are sitting in regulatory limbo right now, waiting for the right study, the right crisis, or the right political moment to be reclassified? The answer is growing wild right now, in the dirt beneath your feet. Patient, persistent, and waiting for anyone willing to look.